Hi guys, in this video I'll be showing you how I made this mini terrarium and outlining the steps so that you can make your very own. A terrarium like this could be a perfect gift, especially with Christmas coming up soon, so let's get right into it. For a terrarium like the one I'll be making in this video, you'll need the following: rocks or something similar to act as a drainage layer. I'll be using slate as I've recently been loving how it looks. Then you'll need a separating fabric. I'm using geotextile fabric, but you can also use window mesh or any other porous material. Another thing I like to include is an activated carbon layer. It's not necessary, but I find it really helps create a healthy ecosystem. A good substrate is very important. I'll get into this one later. Now some other bits and bobs to have to hand are sphagnum moss and various botanicals. I have a selection of alder cones, cork bark, twigs and leaf litter, although many I won't use. And of course, the most important thing, the terrarium itself. I have this small jar with a wooden lid. I think it should frame the scape I have in mind well. Now the first thing I do is add my drainage layer. If your terrarium is going to be dry, you can probably get away with not making one. However, in a high humidity build like this one, you should make sure to add a sufficiently large layer. The fabric I'm adding here keeps the substrate separate from the drainage layer. If this is not included, then the substrate becomes waterlogged. I'm cutting the geotextile fabric into a circle just larger than the jar itself. When it's added, the edges will fold up slightly and help further keep the substrate separate. On top of the fabric, I like to add a thin layer of activated carbon. It neutralises and traps harmful toxins and keeps the ecosystem balanced. This isn't necessary as the substrate I use already has carbon in, but I like to include it anyway. Now for the substrate I'm using. This is a mix I made myself. It contains sphagnum moss to retain moisture, orchid bark and leaf litter to slowly break down over time and release nutrients, vermiculite and fine and coarse sand to aid in drainage, as mentioned before, carbon to neutralise toxins, worm castings to enrich the soils so that the plants can thrive, and finally cocoa coir and compost to enrich and build up the bulk of the substrate. You can see that I'm using a spoon to adjust the scape to my desired shape, creating a basin with the sides sloping up to the sides and back. This increases the area for planting and helps create a sense of scale. To prepare the plants for the terrarium, I pop them out of their pots and break up the root ball with a wooden stick so it's easier to wash the soil off the roots. I thoroughly wash the roots, removing as much of the soil as I can. The less that remains, the quicker the plant can adapt into the new environment, or at least that's what I've found. Now the plants I've selected are too large for the terrarium as they are. However, with a kitchen knife, you can easily cut a portion off and they keep growing as normal, as long as you leave the plants with adequate root systems. I'm trying to create a jungle pathscape, so to accomplish this, I plant this Peperomia Napoli lights in the left background, slightly overhanging over the basin. This helps create a sense of scale and the silvery sheen adds a nice contrast to the next plant, which is a Fittonia Mosaic white with stunning white veins and dark green leaves. It's the type of plant I imagine when I think of a jungle. Planting it to the right of the Peperomia instantly creates a path between them, winding deep into the jungle. The final major plant is the Peperomia rotundfolia. Its smaller leaves directly contrast the broader leaves of the other two, creating textural variation. It also helps fill the middle background and darken it, so that the immersion of the scape isn't broken. The bright green leaves also help create more contrast and enhance the jungle vibe. Now the main focal point is a winding path, larger at the foreground and narrowing as it moves back. This creates a central focal point that helps draw the eye in. To further create a jungle aesthetic, I plant small pockets of fern moss on sphagnum moss to the sides of the path to imitate shrubbery and further enhance the sense of scale. Sphagnum moss is used to retain moisture so that the mosses don't dry out. Now I'm happy with most of the planting, but I think it's missing something in the mid-ground. So, to break up the plants, I'm adding some small twigs which I collected locally, looping them over the path until I get an arrangement I'm happy with. The last touch I want to add is some oat leaf creeping fig. I had some in the back to vary the leaf shape, and a smaller piece in the mid-ground to further add variation and break up the path slightly, making it seem overgrown and wild. Moving on from the terrarium to the lid, I want to add this small LED to light up the scape. To do this, I first had to drill through the lid. Halfway through, I drilled an indent into the other side to prevent any blowout and splintering, which could be unsightly. I threaded the USB through the hole, then proceeded to hot glue the LED into place, and glued a window mesh around it to prevent anything getting in or out of the terrarium. The final thing I did was cut a small circle out of foam with a slit in to fill the rest of the hole. It fits snugly and doesn't look bad in my opinion. Now to conceal the wire, I used my Dremel tool to create a channel in the back of the lid where the wire can be led out where it's hidden much better. With this done, there's only one last thing I want to add before it's finally finished. I also removed some of the built up humidity with some cotton wool. I might need to do this a few more times until the terrarium balances and becomes stable. The thing a scape like this needs, in my opinion, is of course some inhabitants, and so I have a garden millipede and some small tropical orange isopods from my colony. They should be the perfect occupants and will help maintain the ecosystem by eating any detritus and bring some life to the jungle. And to make it ideal for the inhabitants, I added a few bits of leaf litter so that they have some detritus to eat. I also think leaf litter really finishes off a terrarium. Adding the millipede first, it quickly crawled into the undergrowth. Likewise, the isopods darted all around, although I'm sure over time they'll become much more confident in the open. With them now added, the scape is finally complete. Overall, I'm very happy with how this terrarium turned out. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe even made your own. If you did enjoy, please consider subscribing and see you next time.